The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library. Welcome to The Money Factor, our program that focuses on business and consumer issues as well as personal finance topics. I'm Richard Naylor, your host. Each week, we welcome local guests to shed light on a wide range of money-related factors. Today, we will be discussing networking, as taught by Wayne Baker of the University of Michigan in his book, Achieving Success Through Social Capital. To help us review the book, we have invited Lisa Giruzzi from Transformational Conversations, who specializes in networking. Let's go meet her and begin. Lisa.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for asking.
Well, we're really glad you could come and talk about this book. I'm a little excited about it because I've seen a lot of books on networking, and most of them seem more basic than this.
Yes.
So I was happy to see a little more substance.
I agree. I think this is a book that really goes into it in a much more detailed, but gives a lot of depth and background for why network to begin with.
Now let's tell everybody to start with exactly what the book is. We can also put a picture of it on the screen.
Okay.
But you want to kind of go over the book, Achieving Success.
It's by Wayne Baker, Achieving Success Through Social Capital.
And he's from the University of Michigan.
Yes, this was published by the University of Michigan Business School Management Series.
So
and
that gives it a little more authority right there.
Yeah, and the thing that's great about it is there's a lot of research in it, but it's not a heavy text book. You know, the notes, there's quite a few notes throughout it that shows different studies and research, but it doesn't feel like you're reading a textbook in any way. It's
a nice combination of a self-help book and something that is based on studies, real
Absolutely.
studies.
Yeah, a lot of substance in this book.
And since this is a library-based show, we can say that it's also published by Jossie Bass in 2000, and something like 294 pages. But don't hold me to that.
Don't quote you.
Well, how would you describe the book? I'm thinking we need to give people an idea of an overview of the book before we go into details.
Okay. Well, I would describe it as a different way of looking at the whole concept of networking. Instead of looking at it as a thing to do, as like events to go to, or some kind of a thing to put on your to-do list, more as a mental model, you could say, or a paradigm. And this book describes in great detail how to come from that perspective and also how to increase your capacity to network and be successful as a networker.
And when you put those two things together, paradigm, which sounds kind of fancy, and all the details, I think that makes us feel a little more comfortable.
Yes.
That it's not some theoretical model that doesn't mean anything.
Absolutely. That's one of the things that was impressive to me in this book most of all, is that its ability to make it real. And you could change one little thing in how you do things and it could make a world of difference. So you don't have to do everything in the book. It's not a 10-step recipe for being a successful networker in any way. It really is looking at how you can make small changes to make a big difference.
Now the book title, while what we read doesn't include networking, the subtitle does. Mm-hmm. It includes the word social capital.
Yes.
I think we better explain what that is.
Well, it was interesting for me in reading this book, his use of the word social capital and why he picks those two words in particular and puts them together. And for me, it's social capital is sort of the larger umbrella, and networking kind of comes under that. To me, and one of the things I think he says is that it's social because it includes resources beyond business. It's not just your professional. It's your personal, different relationships that you have. And then capital because it's productive. It's like you think of money as capital. social capital is something productive. It helps you to get something done.
And it can take a lot of forms. It could be in money, and in this case, they point out information, any kind of help.
Yeah, any ideas, all different resources, and that's why I think social capital is a much larger term for what, than just networking.
It gives you a nice image.
Yes, yeah. It even talks about how the other reason he uses the term social is because nobody owns it. It's not a individual phenomenon. It's a team or a social phenomenon.
And that comes back again and again in the book.
Yeah, definitely.
The first chapter, he kind of sets the stage. He doesn't know who's reading the book, how much they know, whether they've read every networking book out there, or whether they're coming to it fairly fresh. So he introduces some new concepts. At least they could be new to some people. Maybe we should go over those a little bit. What is a network, to start with? That's about as simple as we can get.
Yeah. Well, the one, I think the same chapter you're talking about is where he talks about the myth of individualism.
Yes.
And when he talked about that, that's where I got the pervasiveness of networks. He wasn't just talking about, I know you, and because I know you, and we talked, that's how I got on the show. He's talking about everything from an athlete who has an incredible amount of talent, natural talent, had a whole network of people that had him get to the place where he is.
Right.
And so this thought that we're just solely individuals with individual talents and strengths is a myth, that everything of who we are is the result of having been a part of various networks, whether it's a coach that trained the athlete or it's my third grade teacher. I mean, all of that is included in the networks, and I think that's one of the ways that how deep he's talking about this. He's not talking about it on a superficial level. But when you ask the question, what is a network, I think he defines it as an ability to tap into the hidden resources. That if you look at your network, there are hidden resources there, like we talked about, information, ideas, money, all different things. But the network includes all of that, and it's all the connections that you have and the connections that other people have.
So to draw a conclusion from that, as you were saying that, I realized, yes, there's the business side, but there's a bigger side that this all rests on.
Yes.
And that would go all the way to someone's environment when they were growing up. They may be bright, but they never even learned to speak properly as a child. So how could they do well in school? Maybe it was a chaotic environment. So they couldn't have done it by themselves without some help.
Exactly. Yeah, and when you look at the world as a series of networks, it actually gives you leverage to go where you want to go, because you're not doing it on your own, and so you don't feel like you're this small person in an ocean. You're actually a part of something, and you're connected to something.
And then I think I remember the one purpose of bringing that up was that he wanted people to realize you can try as hard as you want. You can believe in Horatio Alger, that he started from nothing, and he did, of course. It's a wonderful story.
Yes.
But keep in mind that there was a lot of context to what was going on, and that if we want to succeed, we're better off not just saying, I don't need anyone.
That's right.
Which would be probably something no one would say it that way.
Right. Well, but I do think that there's a lot of emphasis on individual success in our culture and our society. And I think the thing that he really debunks in this book, especially in the first chapter, is the advantage to being a part of networks. The first chapter, I think, is called Why Social Capital and What Do You Care, or What Do You Need It For, or something to that effect. And he goes through the research that shows people that are part of networks live longer, have happier lives, more meaningful lives, easier to get jobs, make more money. I mean, the list just goes on and on.
I think he even had a little, was it humorous, sidebar that said, do people who have good networks get as many colds?
Yes. Yeah, and he actually even had evidence for that. To
back that up.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was pretty incredible. And as someone who wholeheartedly believes in networking and is a part of many networking groups, from the Chamber to Business Network International, I have had the experience of different kinds of networking. And occasionally, people will have a sense that networking is sort of a bad name, or the old expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know, kind of gets a bad connotation. But I think he really, in this book, demonstrates that there's nothing bad about it.
There's nothing inherently bad about it.
Absolutely, exactly, inherently. He even talks about that it's not the knowledge, it's what you do with it.
Right.
And that's where the ethical issues come up.
So before we go on to the next chapter, I think the ethics probably would be something to go into a little more from the point of view of people might be reticent to change their networks or to make changes because they're thinking, well, I'm not going to drop old Joe, my fishing buddy, because he doesn't bring me anything.
Right. And I don't think he's suggesting that at all. I mean, variety is key. Diversity and variety is key. And that was one of the biggest learnings I had in this book, and I'm sort of getting ahead to the next chapter, but when you assess your own networks and you start to see, what is the diversity in your own network, from the types of contacts that you have to how many people know each other, because that can detract from your networking ability.
Right.
So it got ahead of myself. I'm sorry, but
no, I don't think so. Actually, I had a mild criticism of the book, but I'm not even sure that it's justified. The criticism is that perhaps he's mixing up the chapters a little bit. You get a little bit of the ethics in the first chapter, and then he, in the fourth chapter, brings in something that he actually was still doing in the third chapter.
Yes.
And I guess it's okay because we need to understand it, but
well, I think
it's not clear cut.
Yeah, and I think that's true about this particular topic. It's by having different things in different chapters, it sort of brings you along, versus having to, when you're in chapter 4, what did he say in that chapter? It really, I think he does a nice job of weaving.
And a little recapitulation.
Yeah.
One other thing that he defines in the first chapter, and that most people have heard of, but it isn't necessarily always put into the context of networking, should be probably, is the small world principle.
Oh.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Is that the 6 degrees of separation?
It could be.
Yeah.
Or 3 if you were. I forgot the gentleman.
Yes. That was amazing to me. I'd always heard of the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. I've heard it many times, but I didn't understand it to the level that I did in this book. And when you start to recognize that it is a small world, and you're really only ever 6 connections away from anybody you want to meet.
In the world.
In the world. That's really amazing, and how he breaks it down is so simple. It's very easy to understand and I think, to maximize and to use in your own life. And again, this kind of goes back to the ethics again. He makes it clear that the whole concept of using a relationship, people shy away from. They feel like, I don't want to use people. And he doesn't mean it that way. It's something that's mutually beneficial. And he even says later in the book, he says the whole point of a social network or having social capital is to give back. That's
right.
The whole point, is to give, not to receive, not for what you're going to get. So the whole concept of using a relationship is not to take advantage of, it's to give.
Like you said, it's not like a vending machine. You put in a quarter and then you say, okay, where's my
That's right.
Where's my gum? Or
Right. Yeah, very good. And but getting back to what you were saying about the small world, he uses Kevin Bacon, he uses the mathematician, and he uses another gentleman who I can't remember, but in each of those cases he makes it very simple to understand how these connections work. And that, I know some, just the fact that we know each other, we both have probably close to 500 or 1,000 people that we know. And so there's somebody that can put me in touch with somebody who knows somebody, and that within 6 conversations at the most, we will have gotten to the person we want to get to.
As long as we can make the connections. And I think now the second chapter is really ready to be talked about, because that's where he spends most of it on analysis of a person's network. But in doing so, he also helps explain different types of networks and why you would want this kind of network and not that kind of network.
Yeah, and I think he does a great job of not making any kind of network wrong. If you have a closed network, it's not a bad thing.
Now we've got to define open and closed.
Right. I think it's entrepreneurial and closed are the 2 distinctions.
External, internal, entrepreneurial, and closed.
Right. And the closed is basically when virtually everyone you know knows each other. And he has figures in here that I'm a person very visual, so it really helps to have the visuals that he has in this book. But when the people that you know all know each other, that's considered a closed network.
Right.
And he doesn't say, well, that's a bad thing or any of that, but he says you want to know why you want to increase your social capital. You know, you don't want to just willy-nilly throw people out. That's not the point. But the whole second chapter is about assessing, I think, at least most of it is about assessing what your current status is so that you can be accurate. And he talks about how most people think they have a bigger network than they actually have.
Right.
And the research done on that is pretty interesting, I thought, to see how most people answer the questions incorrectly. And it was eye-opening.
So the internal is when everyone pretty much knows each other. Now these are pure, and he said nobody has a purely internal or external. They tend to be much more internal. On the other hand, how would you describe an external network?
Well, I may be mixing up external and entrepreneurial.
Same thing.
Okay. The entrepreneurial is that you basically you serve as the bridge between different groups. So, for example, if I'm a member of the chamber, for example, and I'm also the member of a particular association, then I'm the bridge between these two groups. So if someone in the association needs something, I could say, oh, I know somebody in the Chamber of Commerce who can provide that for you. And so the entrepreneurial is a member of a number of different, whether it's a religious organization or faith-based organization or education, or there's a number of different groups. But an entrepreneurial network, the folks don't really know each other, and you serve as the bridge.
Right. We're not going to have time to explain everything in the book, so I think it's okay to skip a little bit and to fill in a couple of the parts of how those two things relate to each other. But if you have an external one, obviously you have a lot of gaps in between, which leaves the possibility of helping people
Close
connect.
The gap. Exactly.
Right. And so
he calls them a linchpin.
A linchpin, right.
Which, again, a nice visual to think about the person, being that kind of person. And the other thing that's great is it takes your attention off yourself. That's, to me, that's why I think people get stuck when they're networking, is they have all their attention on themselves. Am I doing it right? Am I saying the right thing? Did I sell this right? And so it gets very self-focused, and so we're having a conversation, and I'm over here thinking, how am I doing? How am I doing? How am I doing? I'm not listening. I'm not, interested in what you're doing. Even if I am interested, I have all my attention here.
Which winds us back to the individualism and thinking I can do it myself, when really it's not your failure either. It's the fact that you're not connected and you're not making the connections.
Yeah. And acting as a linchpin, it gets your attention off yourself. Because then it frees me up to say, what is your need? What can I provide for you? In what way can I support you? And then if I do that, I am then unforgettable to you.
Right.
Because if I've provided exactly what you need, you're not going to forget me. But I can't do it in order so that you don't forget me. That's the key, is to have my attention on you and then just trust that it's going to come back sooner or later.
And so the idea is that there's social capital, which is a social possession. And if you can enrich the network with social capital, then you're part of the network, right? And then everybody does a little better.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that he talks about in here, sort of in the background, is how this improves the world. This is a book about business and being successful, but clearly the underlying message is also that by helping others, we're making a better world, because people are going to be happier, live longer, more successfully. And so it's a benefit to everyone, including yourself. And but it's not having yourself in the forefront, like it's all about me kind of a thing.
That really also ties it together, because now we're really showing why networking is actually helping everybody have a better economy, a better world, better global trade, everything.
Yeah. Later in the book, again, I might be getting ahead of myself, but
That's
later
okay.
in the book I found it really interesting when he used the examples of the different countries that helped each other during crises. And there was...
East Timor, if I can remember one of the countries.
Yeah, you have a better memory.
Well, who did they help?
Australia?
Yes.
And then Mexico and Ethiopia. Ethiopia was the one that was really helping Mexico during the 80s when they had their earthquake, and that was because Mexico helped Ethiopia in the 30s. And so they showed how, even though Ethiopia had starving people and all that, they wanted to give something, and that's how long-lasting and strong helping others is. That bond is there.
That's truly exciting.
Yeah.
You think about a lot of things. You think about France in World War II. You think about Germany and the Berlin Wall.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things, a lot of people there haven't forgotten, even though stresses may cause some problems. But there's truly a fundamental need and desire to pay people back for something.
Yes. Yeah, and one of the things that is true, I believe, about humans is that we want to be a part of the whole. We want to make a difference, and we want to be, contributing. And I think that's what he's talking about, is taking that need that we already have and that desire and giving us permission to do it,
Right.
and saying, yeah, do that. Don't be an individual. Not don't be an individual, but don't just solely rely on yourself. Be willing to help others, and be willing to let others help you, and then anything's possible.
Now that gets into some possible difficulties. And now I'm skipping around too, because I don't think we can really just do the whole book. If you work for someone,
Yeah.
and you have a question of whether this person really should be buying this product or something from someone else, the author says you should be helping them buy it from someone else, although he softens that a little. If it means your job, of course, you shouldn't
Right.
do that.
Right. Well, I think he gives an example where a person is working for a new company and they used to work for another company, and as he's talking to the customer, he realizes that the product that his old company had is exactly the right thing this person needs.
Right.
And that is a dilemma, because I either go for the sale or I do what's right for the customer. And what I think he's saying is you got to try to do what's right for the customer, and that will pay off in the long run. I mean, earlier in the book he talks about the banker who decided to change the way she thought about the people who came to her, not as potential loans, but as what could she do to help them. And she sent them to other banks sometimes. She did everything she could to help people, and she had the most sales by far of anyone in her bank. And that's what she attributed it to, was being able to see people as people, and how could she help them versus potential loans,
Right.
and kind of reducing them to that.
I don't know if this tells my age. There's no gimbals anymore, but I guess a lot of people still remember the person who sent them to the opposite store around Christmas time, that
Yes.
they didn't have the tie or whatever it was.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so that goes way back, that people, stores, salesmen who say, well, we don't have that, but if you go across the street, that office supply store does.
Yes. And when that happens, you remember that, and you'll go back to the person who treated you well. And I think that's the other thing he talks about in this book, is that if you only look at the short term, then you're missing the opportunity of the long term. And that to me is, investing in your relationships. And a lot of times I think that's where people don't excel, is in investing in a relationship. They look at it as a short term versus cultivating a relationship with somebody. And I think that's the real opportunity, not only of this book, but of learning about yourself and the kind of relationships you have, and how can you build on those.
There was another concept that would go well right here that the author brought in. I think it was a human moment.
Yes.
At first I think I had a hard time getting it. What is a human moment? How intense does it have to be? And when he said it doesn't have to be intense at all, I think I became even more confused.
Well, I think it's just, if I remember correctly, what he's talking about is not viewing people as what they can do for you, but that they're human beings. And it is what you can do for them, but also recognizing that you're both human.
And listen, make it real. I think that was one thing I do
Yes.
remember from that.
Well, the authenticity is very
Right.
important. We all have the image in our mind of a bad salesperson who's like, hey, and not
Right.
authentic. And they'll tell you stories about, their kids, and you find out later they don't even have them, but they're trying to connect with you. And he really is talking about being genuine and authentic and acknowledging that you're human, they're human, and when two human beings work together, something is really possible that is not possible if you're coming from a more strictly business sort of
Right.
concept.
So if you have a strategy that is unethical, like some used car dealers used to have, there are a lot of good ones. I probably, even with reticence, say that, but that is a group that in the past has had a problem with reputation. And that would be because the salesman would have a big striped shirt and a wild tie and a funny jacket, and he would come out and want to sell you this beautiful car for a great deal.
Right.
But all he was looking at was a thing of money that he needed to extract.
Right.
And
Right.
I think we can feel that when that happens.
I think so too, and I think that there's also less obvious examples of that when someone is trying to sell you something so that they can make their quota versus you really need this, or this is the best thing for you. And in this book, I think he's very clear about having a human moment, and when you recognize somebody as a human being, you would never want to do that. You wouldn't want to just sell that person. You would want to take care of them as if they were your family or your, a close friend. And I think that, I think we all know that conceptually. I think he does a very good job of making it real.
And bringing the research to bear that shows that actually this is true.
Yeah, and again, I think one of my favorite things about this book is he combines two worlds. The very intellectual with the, the real day-to-day. Okay, I own a business. I'm trying to make ends meet.
Right.
Great theory. How does it help me? He
Right.
makes it clear how it helps you. And I think in the later chapters, when he talks about how to go from a closed network to an entrepreneurial network, very easy ways of doing that. And as I said earlier,
Joining an association, getting involved in some other group, getting involved with other employees' projects, cross-fertilization teams.
yeah, and he takes it from whether you're a business owner or whether you work for another company, how you can do that and how it can be to your advantage to be seen as that person. And I can only say from my own experience, I have people who call me, former clients, I have friends who call me and say, listen, I need a lawyer, or I need a hairdresser, or whatever. Who do you know that does this? And I've become that person in my world, and it's an incredible feeling to know.
In your job, you couldn't survive without that, no?
No, that's true. That's true. Because a solo entrepreneur, that's my lifeline. But I'm clear that, by giving someone a great referral to a lawyer or a hairdresser for that matter, will it help me get business? I don't know. It's not important. What's important to me is that I've been able to help somebody get what they need. And over the years, I've become that person, and it's very satisfying. It's a great place to feel good about not only the work I do, but the way I can help people.
So I guess we're running out of time, but we can definitely say that we give a thumbs up to the book.
Absolutely. I highly recommend it. I've actually already recommended it to a number of people, and I serve as an educational coordinator for a networking group that I belong to, and I'm going to use some of the stuff in here to help educate some of the people in my group.
And we need a few more copies in the library. We'd be happy to buy them, too.
Okay, great.
So thank you again for joining us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
And I want to thank everyone for watching, and hope you watch again next week when we have another edition of The Money Factor.